you didn't really care enough whether the procedure was carried out the way you thought it would have been, or you would have agreed with them. If you disagreed with them, then you didn't care enough about procedure being handled properly, or you would have voiced your disagreement and continued with your disagreement until either that check partner agreed with you, or you had another check partner come into the picture, and you all resolved the question agreeably. Then you have done it in the right way. We were talking about Mercotti, some that people will say, well, Mercotti said this and Mercotti said that, and we have asked Mercotti to step back in taking lead, and we know that part of the reason he takes too much lead is because he has almost established a routine over months or maybe years because of his wanting to be responsible in certain areas, that some other and at times he has been responsible but too much alone and not always had a check partner, plus the fact that others have let him take responsibility to the degree that they're not doing their share of it. Now, the only way we're going to correct it is to go ahead and have Mercotti back up as he's instructed to do, not to take the lead like in scheduling of retreat, who comes to retreat, and that's just an example. But now, let's don't let the fact that Mercotti, in order to learn his lesson, is backing up, let's don't let him be frustrated because he's seeing things not happening that need to happen and he can't do anything about it. He's got to let those things fall on their face. If they fall on their face because he's not doing something about it. Because we can't have a ship run by Mercotti. And we feel like Mercotti doesn't want to run the ship. But here, let's say Mercotti goes to someone, as he has done, and presents something to them, and then they're involved in it. But if they don't, if it comes up to Links, and they felt like Mercotti had a strong idea in mind about what should happen, and even though they were involved in it, they say, well, Mercotti said so-and-so. That's totally wrong. Once someone involves you in it, or like Lagodi and Mercotti were, say, for example, in Glen Odie's not coming up to retreat this last time. Lagodi got an instruction over the telephone from Links that if he had finished his task in Amarillo, that he could return to the retreat craft if there was room. And Links at the moment was involved in thinking about a lot of other things and was not aware at the moment they told Lagodi that Sayodi was coming up to begin the vacation period, and that there were 5 already scheduled in that car before the prospect of Lagodi's return came up. But when Link said to Lagodi, you come back then if there's room in the returning craft. Now, let's say that Lagodi is bringing that up with, it so happened, Mercotti, and Mercotti said, well, it's not anything unusual. We've changed the schedule before. We can change it again. And Glen Odie doesn't need to come up. You can go in his place. Now, is it right for Lagodi in this instance to let Mercotti do that? Mercotti, in a sense, is trying to work out an accommodating situation for Lagodi to be able to come back. But Lagodi has to be more responsible and stick to his guns and say, wait a minute, I got an instruction that says I can't come back unless there's room. It didn't say to drop a person and then I can come back. That's not making room. So I feel like I ought to call the craft. And let's say Mercotti ought to call Links. And Mercotti says, well, you don't need to do that. We can do this other thing in order to accommodate you. We don't have procedure to call the craft. Lagodi has got to stick to his guns. Mercotti's sticking to his guns of doing what he thinks is helpful, but Mercotti doesn't have an instruction for Links. from links. So who should be more persistent in sticking to their guns? The one who has had an instruction directly from links concerning this particular issue, which was, you don't go back unless there's room. So Lakota should say, I'll take my chances with breaking an instruction and call links in order to straighten this out. Or if there's someone else before he takes the steps to make the call, ask someone else to enter in as a third check partner and say, let's discuss this together. And Marcoti says we can drop someone from going to retreat who's recently been there. My instruction was to not to come back unless there's room. What do you think? We're involving a third person. And if, let's say the third person says, well, did you feel that instruction, Lakota, was clear that you were not to come unless there was room in the people already returning? And Lakota says, yes, I feel like it was. Then that's all as far as it needs to go. What this all adds up to is you don't go far enough as check partners, nor do you take equal responsibility. One person who's taking a lead and asks a check partner, believe it or not, has still not learned to look deeper into the thing that their check partner on, so that they are equally taking the lead. Let's say, because we should be able to ask the check partner, how did so-and-so come about, and they would be incapable of saying, well, so-and-so felt like we ought to do so-and-so. They should not be able to do that. That means they were a lousy check partner. Or they really weren't a check partner at all. They were just going through a routine. Because if they knew that so-and-so said we were to do so-and-so, then they were involved, right? Or they wouldn't have known it. So since they know it, that means they fell down on the job of being a check partner and were willing to go with someone else just because they were speaking too strongly. Now in Marcoti's case, we're trying to help Marcoti with the problems that he has that he wants to correct, and that is of taking too much initiative. But how are we going to help him if every time he's involved with something, whoever his check partners are just say, well, Marcoti said so-and-so. How are we going to help him? The only way we're going to help him, it looks like, is to say, well, Marcoti can't do anything. And it's not really, it's only 50% Marcoti's fault. It's 50 to 55% those people's fault who have been his check partners who won't take equal responsibility, won't look into it deeply enough, examine it carefully enough to agree with him or disagree with him. If they agree with him, and we say then to Kadoti, who was his check partner, how did this happen? And then Kadoti should say, Marcoti and I decided it should happen. But since they suspect that Links is thinking it's the wrong decision, they quickly say, oh, Marcoti said, you know, and so upon the blame, because I'm just check partner. He said so-and-so. I'm sorry, you weren't a check partner. Or you couldn't have said that. If you were a check partner, you would have said, we said so-and-so. We came up with that decision. Now, and if you felt like that the other person had the strong decision and you merely went along, then you were a lousy check partner. That's what it amounted to. You didn't take the responsibility of looking in depth. It's just like we've seen people in the lab at times when someone's slicing a piece of bread, they get a check partner to look at it. The check partner glances over and sees where the knife is on top of the loaf, nods yes, and glances back, and that's the end of it, even though by the time the knife hit the bottom of the loaf, the slice may have been totally ruined. Do you see what we're saying? And what kind of check partner was that person who was helping them in cutting the bread? They could have loused up the loaf totally, but every time they looked, the knife seemed to be in the right position. What kind of check partner were they? And it's just that serious, whether it's a loaf of bread and slicing the slices, or it's making decisions and who's coming to retreat, or any other decision. In other words, our check partner task is still not working correctly. Some are singing too loud who need to learn to sing less. But how are they going to learn to sing less if those who are singing too softly, by not taking enough initiative and enough responsibility, don't let them sing less? Is our craft going to have to collapse in order to force people to take more responsibility who are not now taking it, and in order to force people who are taking too much responsibility to back off? So we've got to work harder on this aspect of check partnerships.
Another thing, we don't want to think in the way of a human, and I'll use the vital signs report that we got today. Lynx has gotten quite a few cars since we have been with you all that had nothing less than 60-some-odd thousand miles on it. And in other words, we thought it was low mileage. You know, if we were able to get a car with that little mileage on it. And we're getting reports from vital signs people that so-and-so's car has 60-some-odd thousand miles on it. Now, what kind of thinking is that? In other words, if you begin to think that something's going to go wrong because it has such and such 1,000 miles on it, then you can bet your bottom dollar something's going to go wrong. But when we got our cars, like old green car, if you remember, it had probably 80,000 on it when we got it or something. We thought, wow, we've got a lot of use out of this car.
And this is an actual fact. We have gotten 2 or 3 cars who had in the vicinity of 60, 68, 70,000 miles when we got them. And we thought, boy, we're really lucky, because we'd been driving cars that all had in excess of 100,000 miles on it. And to get something that was under 100,000 miles sounded like it was really good.
Now, if the vital signs people begin to think that something's going to go wrong with the cars because it has so many miles on it, then you can bank on things are going to go wrong. And this applies to just about anything that we have there. It's I know this isn't on the same subject, but since we have this, I think this tape going, I think you can apply it in a lot of ways. If you expect, let's go to Mercoti again. If you expect Mercoti always to be the one that you go to for solving problems, then Mercoti, you are really putting Mercoti in a bad place, because he is not able to overcome that characteristic.
Taking too much lead.
Take too much lead. He is becoming a wagon master. And there are no wagon masters in the next level. Now, the Satellite 2 and the Satellite 1 individuals, if you think that you don't have to take responsibility, you are mistaken. You take responsibility according to what you are involved in the craft. We got a note from an individual today about how all the ones in this retreat craft who are permanent people take responsibility almost equally. And it felt good to that individual. Now, it hurts us to hear that it isn't happening in the main craft. We're happy that it's happening here. But it hurts us to think that all of you are not taking equal responsibility, because that means that you are not trying to do your part as a member of the next level in your craft. If you all were put on what they would call maybe a mothership, and you are with different older members of different levels, and let's say you were the newer ones in that mothership, and you saw everybody moving around and taking responsibility, and you said, well, I guess everything's done, so there's nothing for me to do. I'll just go get this book and read it. Or just walk around, look out at the heavens or something, you wouldn't exist very long in that craft. But you want, and as soon as you get on that craft, your thought is, what part do I play on this craft? And you immediately go to somebody and say, what are my duties on this craft? And if they say your duties are to gaze out at the heavens and read a book, and then you say to them, that's all I have to do? Are you sure this is all I have to do? You mean I came up here just to sit and read a book? I could have done that back at the craft, back in my human kingdom. In other words, you don't want to take one person's word for it. And you can even say, I may be wrong, but are you sure? Is there someone else that I could check with? And immediately, because one person would not make the decision there. You have every right to question that. You are a member of the next level. If you do not take responsibility, whose fault is it? Is it Tiando's fault because we haven't given you any exact task? Or is it your fault because you have not decided or desired to take the responsibility? You can take responsibilities in everything that you do during the day. But you do not assume that such and such is done. Mercody's done this, or Satellite 3 takes care of that. I don't have any responsibility. It'll get done. Satellite 3 always does it. Or so-and-so always does it. You see how wrong that is? When you are in a craft, you have a responsibility to make that craft continue to go in an upward motion. If it is not going in an upward motion, then it is your fault. And I don't know how many times we've said this, but I'll repeat it. You should never be tomorrow where you were today. Does that make sense?
Or today where you were yesterday.
Right. That if you are, then you are still at the same place. You are not growing. You are not exerting enough effort. This goes back to the slippage notes. If you are still slipping on things that you were slipping on yesterday, then you have not exerted enough effort to in that direction in order to not have a slippage, the same slippage, the next day.
The only reason you slip is because you haven't become keen. And so it's like slippage is equal to ignorance. Because any time you slip, it's because you were blinded, or you were permissive to being blinded, or you were permissive to the lower forces to be stronger than you at that point, or you would not have slipped. So your keenness, or your being sharp, is going to always conquer slippage. So why not increase the percentages of your keenness and being alert so that slippage becomes less and less? Are you willing for the control of your vehicle to remain the same percentages today that it was yesterday? Like your booger has X percentage of control and you have X, he has 30 and you have 70. Are you going to let that, if that's what it was yesterday, are you going to let it be that way tomorrow? Or are you going to have 75 and he has 25 and the next day you're going to have 77 and he has so forth? That's what it amounts to. You've got to have increased control. Now, he will still try as hard and as frequently, if not as frequently, he will still hunt for those times when you are weak, when he can regain some control. Because this is his job to see if he can't continue to have control of your vehicle. But each time you slip in little ways or larger ways, you are letting him get his percentages back. And your growth is not moving forward. Your percentages are not increasing.
Now, the other night, Doe had a dream, and if Doe doesn't mind, I'd like to share it with y'all. because I feel like it's extremely important. And just sitting here, I can see the importance even more. And that was, he dreamed that he and I went a great distance someplace, and on a plane, right?
In flight. Uh-huh.
And in the process, we were trying to figure out what our name was. Isn't that right?
Well, it's when we got to the place that after we took a long flight, and then we were in this room, and we were waiting for this man who was like our boss, who was an older person, and he was going to come there, and we knew that he had been waiting for us because there was a task there that we must perform. But we were a little anxious when he was coming because we didn't know who we were. And of course, when he walked into the room, the first thing he said was, "What is your name?" He had a big grin on his face he came to me first and asked me what my name was, and I was so desperate, I just didn't know what to do because I didn't know what my name was, and yet, and I looked at T because I was so desperate, and T had this awful look on her face too. Oh goodness, why can't we remember what our name was? And all I could think of was, well, you can call me Tom. I said to this older man, I said, well, you can call me Tom. I said, this is my name, but it's the name used they used it on the plane, and so since I don't know what my name is, you can call me Tom. And he looked like he understood, but the fact was we couldn't remember our names, and we wanted so badly to remember our names. And go ahead.
Okay. Now, the significance of that is that maybe you all can figure it out. That I know I feel like there's a veil that separates our seeing the next level and
knowing exactly who we are.
And we have to know who we are. Each day, it doesn't mean, we know we're members of the next level. That's not what we're talking about.
It's not specific.
There's so much knowledge that we still need to know.
That's right.
And there isn't a day that we do not ask over and over again. We want to see more. We want to awaken more. We want to know more about who we are. Not necessarily what our names are, but that's how it was shown or expressed in the dream. We know that we have to begin to think and respond as members of the next level. Totally. In other words, in our meditation, we try to imagine ourselves as having all of the characteristics that we have dropped in order to teach you all. Can you understand that? In other words, if you all drop a plate or slam a door, before we would say, no restraint. You all have to have more restraint. And in order to be aware of that, we have to lower our vibrations down to actually be aware of it, if you can understand it. And now, a member of the next level, the reason we have to become aware of it is because we are still on the teacher level, right? Now, in order to not to be aware of those things, we have to drop the teacher role. And the only way we can do that is to get beyond the teacher role. Can you understand that? So therefore, when you slam a door, we don't feel it like we would if we were on the teacher level. Now, in order for us to move ahead, we drop things that were happening yesterday. We don't do it deliberately. It happens naturally. what we were doing yesterday, we don't want to do today. Now, let's use what happened this morning. The noise level in the lab was pretty loud.
Not only the lab, but the doors going in and out of meditation.
Right. Okay, now, even though we heard the doors, I know my response, I don't know how Doe felt, but my response was, I heard the door, and it was like hearing it in a distance. You know, like, before long, those doors aren't even going to make an impression upon me. But since they did make an impression, we felt like saying, calling and saying the noise level's pretty high, you know, watching whatever it was. Now, how does this relate to you all? Okay, you all have to learn who you are also. Okay, what are you doing? You're taking the mind that you had in the next level and you're putting it in that vehicle. Do you think the next level's going to tell you, now your name is Mary and your name is John and your name is so-and-so? They're not going to tell you that. You're going to remember it. You're going to knock that veil down. You're going to penetrate that veil, that membrane, whatever you want to call it. You're going to penetrate it so that it will pop. And you are going to remember who you are, and you're going to remember the characteristics that you had.
Now,
Can I
back up here just a second? Where is your part also, since you're still in the same craft, with our dropping the things that we need to drop in order to pop our veil? Your responsibility is to not let your boogers force us to constantly reassume the teacher role at the level of such things as lab does. In other words, you're going to pop the membrane of who you are by forcing yourself to be responsible for those things that would keep us from having to be forced to retreat back to where we were yesterday or last month or 6 months ago. Can you see how that works? In other words, we want to move ahead. Now, I tell you, we're going to move ahead. T and Doe, we're going to get back to the next level. And we're going to, we don't want to be embarrassed. We want to have reawakened enough that we can assume new roles. Now, but as long as we are with you, we are still threatened by our reawakening, by piano roll notes that have already passed in teacher relationship with students. And you are not awakening if you are still being used by the forces that would force us to have to play notes that we have that should be outdated for us. Now, if you take the responsibility of those notes and see that we don't have to play them, then what's happening? We are moving forward as we want to. You are moving forward as we want to. In other words, what T has brought up here is exactly the same thing we talked to you about a few minutes ago. That some can't take so much lead and others so little lead that they are not doing what like Mercody's not moving forward in areas he needed to move forward if he is still taking too much lead. But how is he going to do that? Only by others taking lead, so that he doesn't sit over and become frustrated with anxiety of, I can't take that lead, but yet I see things that should be happening and they're not happening. Now, so he's got to not even permit being frustrated. Lynx has to not even permit the things that your boogers would have you do to force us to back up. We're going to have to just simply not hear those things. But your responsibility is, I'm not going to be a part of the threatening aspect of our boogers that would pull them back. Notes on the piano. Okay, am I getting through to you?
Yes, sure. Let me say something else. When when Doe had this dream, something happened in relationship to us at that time. In other words, he had the dream. This man came up to him and said, "What is your name?" He said, "Tom." Well, the next level knows that that's not his name, you know. And so what did he do? He took us away. Doe did not remember that. But in the process of that happening, we were given the role, we were given the knowledge in our brain, our mind, of who we are. Okay? Now what happens whenever we're given that knowledge? It means that it doesn't come easy. You know, they just don't. We don't wake up and say, "Oh, by the way, my name is so-and-so, Raphael, who has those names," you know. We have to work for everything that we get. Now, we're telling you that it's in our computers now who you are. Okay? Now, how are you going to get it? Okay? No, you're not going to pull. You're going to desire to know who you are. Now, you're not going to come up with some kind of Tom, Dick, and Harry's thing. Okay? First, you've got to become as a member of the next level. And then it will happen naturally. You follow that? In other words, you've got to begin to have the characteristics more of a member of the next level. What are they? You take responsibility. You have as much responsibility to run that craft as Mercoti and any Satellite 3 person. And if you think that we have given the total responsibility to Satellite 3,
to the point of saying you all just don't concern yourselves at all. You let the place fall apart, and so you can blame Satellite 3.
Because when you go to the next level and go onto a craft, you are not going to have a Satellite 3 person take over. You're going to walk onto that craft with the idea in mind of, where do I stand? What are my responsibilities on this craft? Now, if you don't do that, nobody will approach you. You have to have a desire to want the responsibility, no matter what level it is. If it's a responsibility to see that everybody else is taken care of as far as a glass of water, which seems very insignificant to you, but it may be all of the consuming that they do. And if you're given that responsibility, or that they have, and if you're given the responsibility of giving them this life, this substance to keep them going, then that is as important as what the chief does. Because if they don't have it, they cannot keep going. Can you understand that? Now, when you all go back and you share this tape with the others, if you do not know what your responsibilities are after hearing this, then I think I would find out. You know what your responsibilities are. The out-of-craft people know what they're supposed to do at the out-of-craft task. They know how they're supposed to maintain their countenance and how to handle circumstances. They should by now, and we feel like they do. The ones who work in the lab, you know what your responsibilities are in the lab. You know you're not supposed to mishandle the tools. You're supposed to make the best experiment that you possibly can. A perfect experiment. You all know what those responsibilities are. If you are a vital times person, you know what your responsibilities are. Fiber lab and so on. You also know that craft is supposed to be kept spotlessly clean. And if Jim Modi vacuums all the time and nobody else does, that is not a responsibility that Jim Modi alone is to do. Do you follow that? I'm using that as an example because we heard you like that. And it's all assigned tasks you take with a strong responsibility. Your desire to want to do it perfectly is what's bringing in your mind. If you do it with a grain of salt, like we've got a report where a couple of individuals were kind of clowning in the lamp. Their desire to do a good job could not possibly be good if they chose to do that. Do you understand why? Because they had their mind on being silly more than their mind on their task. Now we know that's been corrected. We feel like it's been corrected, but we're using it as an example.
And whatever assigned task you have, or let's say all the individuals who have assigned tasks in that area, whether it's Satellite 3 type responsibilities, whether it's Fiber Lab, whether it's NutriLab, each individual that has some assignment in that area should take equal responsibility with all the other individuals, so that none sing louder. If some lay back, then the ones who are really responsible will start singing louder, and then they have to correct the fact that they're singing louder. And the ones who've been accustomed to holding back aren't going to help things. It's going to be like it's going to falter before they move forward. But there should be none in any of those tasks that are singing louder. And that's not going to happen unless the ones who are singing softer sing as loud as the ones who are feeling more responsible.
You should never say, I don't have that responsibility. In other words, I don't have anything to do. I wish I had more to do. Because you all have a lot to do. If you go, let's take somebody who has an out-of-craft task, and they have nothing to do when they come back from their out-of-craft task. They can write on their book if they want to, but they should look around. And like when we were there at the craft the last time, everything looked awfully dusty to me. And to have such nice furnishings that we got for you, none of those things were cheap. And to not that it mattered whether they were the 5 and dime things that we got or the more expensive, they should be taken care of. They should be dusted. The cushions should be fluffed up and vacuumed. Maybe you're doing it now, I don't know. I know you take care of the floors, but are you taking care of the cobwebs around on the wall and the ceiling and the windows that need to be dusted? And are you concerned about the windows being clean? In other words, when
yes,
you
we
have
had to point out that sidewalks weren't getting swept too much time. There were broken bottles and things in the driveway out front.
In other words, that's your craft. When you go to a craft in the heavens, it's true you won't be doing house cleaning on the craft, but there will be things that everybody will be responsible for.
The equivalent.
And you've got to look. You've got to look for things and become observant. And some of the things that some members of a satellite aren't responsible to do or have not been assigned to it, then the other two crafts ought to take the responsibility to see that they're done. In other words, everyone keeps the ship in ship shape. The lab people usually keep the lab clean. The Fiber Lab people usually keep the clothes clean. The vital sign people keep the vital sign area clean. But who keeps the rest of the craft clean? Who takes that responsibility? You should ask yourself these things. Who takes care of making sure there's enough paper for notes?
There are many, many little tasks that are everybody's responsibility that a few do.
What you want to do is develop your thinking in that way so that you can see things that are not done. And this is getting back to what we were talking about knowing who you are. Now that we know it's in our computer, T&O's computer, then that's the note on the piano roll that goes to you all. And it's time now for you all to imagine yourself having the responses of a member of the next level. And you can begin by taking responsibility, being a good check partner, and always having a check partner. Not going into a task with the idea in mind that we're going to do it this way, and seeing if Lagodi won't agree with me. If he doesn't, then we'll do it my way anyway. You see what I'm saying? That's not a check partner at all. And you will, if you continue that way, when you go onto a spacecraft in the next level or go into a lab in the next level, you will not be used as a check partner. Nobody, because everybody can look at you and see that you do not know how to be a check partner. Can you understand that? It's just like a graph, like you're a graph, and all of the characteristics that you're supposed to know, awaken to, are listed on one side of your body. And you have graphs on what you're good in and so on. In other words, believe it or not, a member of the next level can automatically know what you know and what you don't know. Just like we can come out and know where you are flubbing up in something, you know. And ours is very weak compared to what members of the next level feel. And they know what you know and what you don't know. And if you haven't developed these things or awakened enough in these things, they will know it as soon as they look at you. And it isn't that they're tuning into your mind, it's just that they know. And this is why we stress these basic things that we keep after you on, so that you can develop them and have them developed by the time you go into the next level. And most of it is, we say develop, actually it's awakening. It's getting more mind into your vehicle so that you remember more. And it doesn't mean we want you to remember what it feels like on the spacecraft. We want you to remember what the characteristics are of the next level. And it's, your minds aren't as strong as ours, and that's not a put down. It's just that we happen to be older than you. So it's going to take more effort upon your part to awaken more, to get more of your mind in so that you will feel these things. It's time now for you to feel it. It's time now for you to feel the responsibility. Mercodi feels it. He feels it very strongly, but he's gone a little bit to the extreme. And he's probably done it only because he felt like others weren't taking enough responsibility. You see what we're saying? So it means that everybody has got to push together and take responsibility, work together as a good check partner, and never once say, so-and-so said, when you are one of the check partners. Because if that happens, then you have fallen down on the job. You were not a good check partner, and the person who made the decision wasn't a good check partner. So by doing these things, by having the right kind of attitude that a member of the next level would have, by being tolerant, by being a good check partner, taking responsibility, by trying to catch your slippages, trying to catch your reactions to your classmates, trying to be even-tempered, not have your vibrations change because of somebody's reactions to you or someone else acting in a way that is unbecoming to the next level or to your craft. Anything Actually, you can make your own list of things. And not that you need to, but just be aware of anytime you have a slippage, you try not to do it. Because you want to get above that and become as a member of the next level. In your meditation, imagine yourself being completely, having all the characteristics of a member of the next level, even though you may not even remember what they are. But your desire to want them will open the door to it, because the next level knows that you are like little babes right now in these vehicles. Bring in more of the really nitty-gritty, get rid of the nitty-gritty human characteristics, and bring in more of the mind, so that you will be totally responding.
You know, the feeling I didn't mean to cut you off.
I just want to say one thing. That is, if you know that, and you can whoever goes back to the children, let's say that right here is where you are, and let's say right here, you know this is where. If you can learn all that's in between here, you will know who you were in the next lesson. But you've got to go through all of this before you will know it. In other words, let's say this is muddy water, cloudy water, and you have to push through until you get rid of all of this cloudiness of this foggy, whatever you want to call it. And you want to push through so that you can see when you get to it. It has been given to us now. It's in our computers. And as we push like crazy to get rid of the muddy water that we have, which is the teaching characteristics, but our response, our reaction. You can never have a perfect reaction or response immediately just because you want it. You've got to work for it. In the process of working for it, you are bringing in more money, but you have to have a desire to want it. You follow me? You have to desire it so much. And believe it or not, your reasonable is going to desire it, because your liver's going to say so. But your mind wants to know that you've got to stop listening to that liver and say, even if you don't feel a desire, even if you don't feel a responsibility, you have to make it. Keep telling yourself that I do feel. Because your mind, poor your little old mind, is in there being prevented. Actually, it is being prevented from desires because your booger is stopping you from doing it. But you can't be satisfied with what you will to keep on saying, I want to feel it. I want to overcome it. I want to desire more than anything to know who I am. When we were awakened, way back 100 years ago, we were getting all this information, and it was just like trying to get out of the hole and get up to where we could see the light. And it was just like, I want to know more. I've got to know more. We just kept crawling until we saw the light, and then wham, all of a sudden, it was like, light at last, we know what is happening. But until we crawled out of that hole, we couldn't know. And what a relief it was. It's like a butterfly crawling out of the chrysalis. Well, listen. In a sense, your mind is crawling out of the chrysalis. You've got to, and it's really tough to get those last things out of the way. It is not good, but it's important to put it. Because it takes a lot of strength to push through this booger that is trying to watch you from doing it. Because, you know, this year, there's no way that we can prevent you from doing it.
When he mentioned that dream, there was an aspect to the dream that I feel was important, and that was that I felt like when we were waiting in this room, waiting for this older man to come, because we couldn't do anything until he came, but I felt like all the other people, they weren't in the room, but they were at this place that we had flown to. They had been waiting a long time for us because there was a task to do, a task that we had to do, and since they were waiting for us to get there so that that task could be done. In other words, and the same applies to you. Don't forget, the reason you were sent to do this task was in order to prepare you for other tasks. Now, if we have taken more than the minimum time to do this task of preparing you for other tasks, then there are tasks sitting, waiting for you that need to be done, that are a little behind schedule starting, because the ones who were to do them are still in school, preparing to do, getting the equipment and the education, the preparation they need to do those tasks. Now, I knew that the ones where we were going were waiting. It was like postgraduates or something, waiting for their professors to show up, and they'd already signed up for the course. They'd been there for quite a while, waiting for the ones to come who were going to teach them that course. And yet, here we were when we got there. We didn't even know, we couldn't even clearly see who we were, even though it was interpreted names. But it was because there was still that much clarifying that had to be done, muddy water that had to get out of the way. Now, if there, just to give you a little different facet of perspective on some of these things that people said, if there are two things that will stand you in good stead on the craft, that when you return to the next level to assume other responsibilities, one is abiding by procedures, a solid foundation. It's like you're vibrating to older members that they can count on. You're abiding by procedures. You're wanting to do everything to the nth degree exactly according to procedures. That's one thing. And the second is that thirst for service, that craving for service. And I'm afraid that sometimes your boogers we have innocently, time and time again, put you in a perfect slot to increase that craving for service. And what have your bookers had you interpreted as? Jealousy, resentment, envy. Now, can you understand me? Or do you not understand? In other words, if somebody has a certain kind of task and you don't seem to have many tasks, what comes in? A desire to have those kind of tasks. Now, in other words, what have we innocently done? We've put you in a place to increase your desire for service. But don't make the mistake of spoiling that thing that's growing, that position that you're in of increased desire for service, by spoiling, by trying to interpret it, jealousy, envy, resentment of those who have tasks. Who's in a better position? The person who has more tasks, or the person who is in a position who, while they are there, is craving to have more next level service? Who's in a better position?
I take the one who's getting the first increase, because he's in a real growth opportunity position. So don't dare continue to make the mistake of translating that first position into one of jealousy or envy or resentment. I was in that so-and-so had, or the satellite 3, or that this person, or that they get to do that. I don't ever get to do those things. And yet, look where you are while you're making the mistake of interpreting it that way. You're in a position that is where that thirst for service is growing and growing and growing. You step on the craft, if you can abide by procedures, and you've got a strong thirst for service, you've got the most two basic ingredients going in a very strong way. In fact, nothing could speak better for you, and it will vibrate. But if you go on automatically thinking, well, I won't get much, I won't get many tasks, and I'm sure there are those who will have many tasks, and once again I'll be put in a position where I'll still have to deal with jealousy or resentment or envy. You will be putting yourself down, and you will be spoiling a very good aspect of your growth that could be developed in the next level. Love for activity in the next level, craving to be busy, loving to have something to do. But what good is it to have something to do if number 2 isn't there? Number 2 being, I'm going to do it only in detail. I'm never going to do anything without a check mark. I'm going to take equal responsibility with my check mark, whether it's 1 on that crew or 10 on that crew. You see what we're saying? So these little things, we're obviously not taking advantage of this little growth period right here. Or let's say there's a lot of room for more work in these areas, or we wouldn't be so keenly aware of them right now and passing this on. So let's move past it.
Yes, and what Bill said about more of his dreams, there are individuals waiting for us to complete this task.
They were waiting for us to start a new one.
Your teachers, unfortunately, long ago, go fast. And that means we could go faster if we were by ourselves. But it's just like we ask you to follow us. Let's say we're going somewhere in a car, but we don't tell you where we're going. But we say you follow us and we'll lead you to the right where we're going. And let's say you got far behind. What do we have to do? We have to slow down and wait for you in order for you to know where we're going. And in a sense, this is what we have to do with you all. If you all would exert as much effort as you can to do what we're asking you to do right now, we could move very quickly. But we cannot go any further. We can't get too far ahead of you, otherwise we will get out of sight of you.
That's right.
And you will not know where to go. And we cannot even communicate with you.
And the next, we depend upon the next level. They have the capacity for blinding us in certain areas that we could move even faster in. And they keep us blinded in certain of those areas in order for us not to get out of sight of them.
So,
can you follow that?
So
and we want you all to insist that they don't have to keep putting blinders in front of us to hold us back. Goodness, we would like to have heavy foot on that accelerator. That's what we love. We wish you loved it as much as we do.
I desire so much to know my name. Not because I care about what it is, but I know that once I know about that, then I will be able to see the next level. Now, I'm not saying I will be able to go to the next level, but I will be able to see it. I know they're out there. And kills me that I cannot look out the window and wait till their time to go by. And you should desire to want to see them, because they are working right amongst us. And we are so blinded we cannot see them.
Why should we have to make them lower their vibrations in order for us to see them?
Last night we were listening to a radio show. We just happened to turn it on to hear the news, and it was about UFOs. So, of course, we couldn't hear that. But I turned it off, and this man said he was working in Central City. Did you all hear that? But he said one man didn't see that station.
He said the fellow that was with him, I pointed it out to him, and he didn't know what I was seeing.
Now, the ones of you who are listening to this tape, you just missed out because you don't know the story. No, we'll tell it. But anyway, this man called his talk show, and he was talking about working for a mining company.
He said for a while back he worked for 6 months in the mining company here in Golden, which is just, in Central City, just a few miles from the street.
And he said he was riding in a truck or something, and he saw this disc over the mountain, and he could see it real well.
And he watched it bank and move.
And, but yes, the man who was riding it, our driving, couldn't see it. Well, that's an indication right there that only on a certain level are you able to see the next level. And I don't know. I hope by our giving you this information, it will instill upon you such a desire to want to see them. Now, you can look at the heavens and you can say, let's see, oh, I think I saw something. Your imagination can come in and see a lot of things, but that's not what we're talking about. Whenever you see, whenever you become, your mind gets strong enough in your vehicle, where you will know who you are and know more of the characteristics of the next level, then you will be able to see the next level.
Can I throw something in there?
Sure.
Knowing who you are is like returning to the spacecraft as awake as you left, plus having added the knowledge and experience and lessons that you learned on this trip.
Great. I mean, you should be.
That's knowing who you are. When you can return on the craft, be who you were when you left, plus what you accumulated in knowledge and experience and strength by this task. That is then being who you are. Can you see that? Now, I feel like sometimes the next level has to work very hard to stay out of our way when their vibrations are low enough for us to perceive them. In other words, I think that in other words, sometimes their vibrations are low enough that we could see them without our raising our vibrations. And it would totally confuse us if we saw them and couldn't get on. Can you not see that we wouldn't be able to understand that. It would just throw us in panic. And I feel like they have to work very hard sometimes, staying out of sight from us at a vibration that we could perceive, so that the only time we will perceive them is when we have perceived them at their higher vibration. Can you understand that? When they have lowered their vibrations so that other humans might have their chance, like they did at Central City when one individual saw them, it's a good thing we weren't there to see them. Because had we seen them, it would have just destroyed, it would have been the biggest disruption in the class process to see them before we had raised our vibration enough to see them without their lowering theirs. I wish you could understand that. I know, Tia, it's very simple to see, but they have to work very hard to stay out of our sight sometimes. Very hard to stay out of our sight. And the only time they can be close by is when they are vibrating at a very high vibration. Because then It's up to us. Because then they're safe. And it wouldn't disrupt the class for us to see them. It would mean that the class is over. The class is over. It would mean it's time to get on board.
Well, we don't want to assume that, and I'll tell you why.
No, I'm saying I said if they were not lowering their vibration.
Right. But I know, what I was saying was that then it's time for us to get on board. We don't know. They might have a lab right here, you know. In other words,
I see what you're saying.
We don't want to say that as soon as you know who you are, that you will leave.
No, I didn't mean that.
Okay.
I meant that it was time to associate with them.
Right.
It would be time to have our association return.
Because then our vibrations would be exactly where they were supposed
That's
to
right.
be, and they could come into our presence.
We don't care whether it's go someplace or stay here. We just want to be back with the family.
You are saying that we will awaken to know who we are.
Well, that's what it seems to us. That's what it seems to us.
To know who you are, you've got to awaken to the point of being who you were plus what you gained. That's right.
You know these procedures we give to you. You know them. Even though, you say, sure, no, because you put them in the book. But what we mean is that the way is magic. You know the way better than you know the human way. And if you fall down on procedure, it's because you haven't exerted enough effort to really awaken enough to know them. Why is it some procedures come easy for some individuals and some it comes hard? Does that mean that person is smarter than you are? No. It means that they have awakened more to know them and to understand them, and it becomes natural to them.
It's obvious that the ones who have dropped out of the classroom aren't going to have to be where they perceive that in order to return, because they haven't done their homework in that reawakening process. Can you follow that? But it certainly is the responsibility of those who have stayed in the classroom. It's like the only way you can get a diploma for this particular course you've been taking is to be who you were plus what you have experienced.
Now, you all, in your Help Wanted meetings, have really brought in a lot of mind. At first, when you all were criticizing people more than actually trying to help them, that didn't bring any mind. But now that you have the reports that we have read just recently, they appear to be more like members of the Next Level would do. Now, this has helped you considerably.
Because you're treating all those aspects with tapes that you have learned through instruction.
And that is sort of reinforcing yourself, the knowledge within yourself. And you say, it's really helped me a lot. Well, of course it has. Every time you read procedures, it helps you a lot, right? And every time you quote procedures, it helps you a lot. Every time you help somebody who's having a problem and you know the answer, it helps you a lot. But it doesn't help you any to talk about the news. You see the difference? It's because that's human. So therefore, you wouldn't want to do anything unless Lynx was sitting with you talking about it. You wouldn't want to do that with each other. Can you see the difference? This would apply to any human thing. We want all human things out of the ground. All human responses. We only want you to become awake enough to really remember who you are and remember the characteristics of the Next Level because they are natural in you. Remember, you graduated from garden. You have been into the Next Level, and therefore you know about the Next Level.
They put you in circumstances that were tough to draw your mind back in to where it's supposed to be, and where it was even before this task. And the effort that it took for you to bring that Next Level mind back into where it was under the conditions of these vehicles and this environment, would give you a lot of strength you didn't have before coming on this task, and thereby prepare you for a lot more tasks than you were prepared for before. Amen?
It's tough getting back to the next level. It's tough becoming President of the United States. You know, a lot of people say, well, if I were President of the United States, I would do this. And all of the poor old Carter, how he thought, well, I'll become president. He was governor of Georgia, and I guess he thought he had enough knowledge to become president. And he probably did a good job compared to the level that he was on, but he isn't doing as good a job as Reagan. Reagan got in there, and he's taken a lot of criticism from everybody.
Even right off the bat.
And but yet he's sticking to his guns, and he's pleading with the people, just let me try and make this work.
And it can't happen overnight, he knows it.
That's right. It took many years for it to happen, and it just didn't happen during Carter's reign. It was during Ford's and all the others it's been building up. And now Reagan has been trying to put the reins on it. And it's beginning to show just a glimmer of light, and if people will trust him. Now, it's tough for Reagan to do that, but it's tougher for you to do what you have to do.
Yes.
It takes an awful lot of effort, but you've got it. You have a strong enough mind to be able to do it, because you have somebody that's assigned to you that knocks you down every time you try to get your head above the water. And it's just like you have a split personality that as soon as you make progress in this way, then he comes in another way to show that you have not made progress. See, you're not going to make it. That's what he wants to tell you. And you've got to say, oh no, you mean you're not going to make it. Throw it, okay. You want to do those things, go do it. But leave me alone.
Don't use me.
Don't use me. Okay?